Okay, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome everybody to our next New Normal session, where we have a strong focus on mental health and mental health awareness. We're very excited for this. This is something that we feel should be a topic of conversation for just about everybody right now. If you can talk about it, you can make improvements on it, and you can be aware of what other people's needs are, and all of those things are very helpful. So. Very excited to introduce our two session panelists today, starting off with Justin Goddard. Welcome, Justin. Justin is a registered psychotherapist with private practices in Aurora and Toronto. He completed his master's degree in counseling and guidance through the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and is currently doing a doctorate in counseling psychology through the University of Toronto OISE, where he investigates what makes people decide to drop out of therapy, which is interesting. Justin's practice primarily focuses on helping adults and young adults with borderline personality disorder traits or diagnoses, and those other emotional challenges like problem anger, depression, and anxiety. Again, Justin, welcome and thank you for joining us. Awesome. It is my absolute pleasure as well to introduce our next panelist, who I've been friends with and have worked with for several years now, Tara Aronson-Pattison. Tara started her career in employment services in '99 and has worked in a variety of roles, including workshop facilitator, employment counselor, job developer, and then for the last 10 years has been managing and coaching employment teams to achieve success in connecting people to meaningful work, meaningful being the key word there. Now, with Path Employment Services, Tara supports her team in placing people with disabilities in permanent jobs in the Hamilton area. Tara and her husband, Larry Pattison, also coordinate a variety of community initiatives with the aim of ensuring all kids and families have access to inclusive, fun, and engaging events. And they just wrapped up this year's Pumpkin Prowl. What is this, the 7th or 8th?
This year was our 7th.
7th.
And we did a little differently this year because of COVID. We turned Halloween upside down and did an online concert extravaganza 5-hour event and did reverse trick-or-treating. It was fun.
This is wonderful. You guys had some really great special guests this year. Who did you have this year?
So we had one of the really cool ones was Will Street from Will's Jams, and he's a CBC Juno Award-winning kids TV star, and he was one of the performers along with 14 other acts, including Sarah Smith, who is from London, and she's about to go on tour with Melissa Etheridge. So,
oh, wow.
Really cool stuff. Yeah, it was awesome.
That's fantastic. And you know what? That's that type of event is sort of par for the course for you and your village, your community of wonderful people. And you know, I've been to the Pumpkin Prowl events in the past, and they're a really wonderful community building initiative. And I know a lot of people appreciate the great work that you guys do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Okay, Ryan, did you want to lead us off with our first topic question?
Sure, the gigantic one.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're kind of starting from the macro, and the way we also like to work with it is that if you do feel like bringing something else into it or kind of taking the conversation in a different direction, please do. This is supposed to be also just sort of a more organic conversation rather than one that's really regimented to a specific question list. But the first question is, so the pandemic has exacerbated existing mental health challenges that many people already face. What are some of the most common signs we can all look for to better understand this elevated impact in both ourselves and others? And then there are some follow-up questions to that as well too. But let's start there. I guess, Tara, maybe if you'd like to kick this off.
Yeah, I mean, what a time that we're living in right now. It's unprecedented for us, certainly, and we've all had to adapt to a number of new ways of doing things. I'm certainly not an expert in mental health, but I can tell you from my own family's experience and from the people that I work with, you know, some of the signs that we see in ourselves for sure are kind of disengaging from maybe activities that we've wanted to do in the past or that we're used to doing, finding new ways of connecting with each other using technology. You know, we've all kind of changed the way we do just about everything. And so some of the signs, with our kids, we have 3 kids, and they have had to change pretty much everything, the way that they go to school, no more sports activities, things that they getting together with friends and sleepovers and things like that. So we've seen some signs in them as well of really having some challenges with mental health, just trying to adjust to this whole new world. And they're not alone in it. And I think that's one of the things to really remember, is that although we're apart, we're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love
absolutely.
that. It's a beautiful sentiment to have in it, and it's absolutely true. I mean, one of the things that we notice once we start the conversation, once we start putting out into the universe, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. Anybody else feel this way? There's a barrage of, oh my God, I'm glad somebody said something. It's just somebody needs to take that first step, and I think what we're hopeful of with the New Normal Speaker Series is that this is that first opportunity for somebody to speak out and say, these things are really hard, and we're challenged with them, and not everything is as it appears maybe on shiny Facebook or social media. And but yeah, Justin, I would throw that to you to say, what signs do you see? Certainly you have a more acute view, I'm sure, of that, given your profession as well.
Well, I echo a lot of what Tara said about noticing these departures from what have come to be our normal behaviors, these kind of deviations that crop up here and there, that aren't necessarily related to external things like the unavailability of a sports league, for example. But I think one of the best ways to understand how mental health challenges are being exacerbated by the pandemic is to also just notice the kind of echoes in our mental state, and how these might relate to things from the past. I mean, a lot of mental health challenges are connected to past traumas that create buttons in each of us that suggest that the world is not a safe place, or that I am vulnerable and I'm fragile. Or that those around me who are supposed to be my kind of allies, or who are supposed to have my back, aren't available for me. And the pandemic kind of agitates all 3 of those things. We feel vulnerable. We don't feel supported by our neighbors who might not be following best practices with respect to social distancing or mask wearing, and we're acutely aware of how dangerous the world can be in certain respects. And so I think noticing how our reactions kind of mirror or reverberate these early experiences that might be connected with mental health can be a way to better understand how it impacts us, and in addition to noticing just what's not quite normal for us, or what's different about how we're responding. I also hesitate as I say that, because the pandemic occurs alongside the unfolding of many, many stories. And sometimes, it could be a new relationship, or it could be a new job. And it can sometimes be these stories have their own ebbs and flows, and high points and low points. And it's sometimes hard to tease apart what's coming from just the normal trajectory of this new relationship, this new job, and what's coming from the pandemic. So even though it's important to notice these deviations, it's not always clear what's coming from what, I think.
Well, I'd like to dig into that too, because and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like some of these deviations or changes in behavior, in a lot of cases, even for professionals, can be fairly subtle in somebody. So when you have in tandem, everybody is dealing with change from the top to the bottom right now. So as you were saying, to tease out which of those things are related to the experiences that we're all going through, and that are sort of normal response behavior to what's craziness of the world right now, and then what of that is sort of on a deeper level and more concerning. Like how do you sort of reconcile the two?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think three things, I guess. Duration. I think of duration. I think of diagnosis and disability, the three Ds. And I think, you know, how challenged are you by these developments, these deviations from normal? How significantly do they impact your day-to-day functioning? How long are they lasting? And whether they go with a mental health diagnosis, I think can shed some light on that question. And give you a clue as to whether this is something that, you know, is maybe transient and circumstantial, or whether this is something more serious or more challenging that's been agitated and you could benefit from some support.
So maybe just a general heightened awareness, you know, yourself. So, you know, if we can't necessarily, you know, tease out those subtle cues, you know, for our friends and our relatives and our coworkers and that kind of thing, you know, maybe just providing that safe space for anybody to be able to communicate, you know, if they notice those things in themselves, and making people feel comfortable and that it's okay to talk, and it's not stigmatized as it has been a lot in the past.
For sure. For sure.
Oh, that's great.
Have you seen, I wonder, you know, either of you can maybe go first, but across the past 7 months, kind of maybe changes or flows or an evolution of how people have felt impacted, or how that extra layer of sort of the global pandemic and shutdowns tied to exacerbating maybe pre-existing challenges or issues that people might have been having have evolved?
Yeah, so I'll start. I think from my own personal view, I've seen the start, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, almost like a shock and disbelief of what's happening, you know, like it's going to end in a couple weeks, you know, the kids are going back to school. It's just an extended March break. And then that went into another month, and then another month. And the summer seemed to feel like there was a bit of a break from everything, because you could spend time outside, and you could, you know, have social distance get-togethers safely in an outside environment. And I think kind of, you know, getting back into school and back into a regular routine, we've really seen some changes. And with the impending winter coming, you know, what's that going to look like? So it's almost been like a little bit of a roller coaster ride. Like we're, you know, from shock to settling into, this is how life is, this is how we live now, to, you know, that uncertainty of what's coming and how we're going to be feeling going forward.
Right. And I guess too, I mean, as you said, when this all started, we were like, oh, it'll be over by summer, and sort of that point of reference. But as we've kind of gone on, there doesn't seem to be a foreseeable end, and kind of further we get into it, the murkier it gets as to when it actually may end. So that, yeah, interesting. Justin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I guess just I've definitely seen what Tara's been noticing, just kind of a shock or a sense of unreality about the pandemic. But I've also been surprised by some of the reactions that I've seen. Like some people have, actually more than some, have, at least in the early stages, reacted with kind of a little bit of joy or maybe excitement, like the novelty of this, or, oh, now I don't have to work as much before all these other, you know, financial realities kick in. There was government support available. So it was kind of an enjoyable time for some folks, certainly not everybody by any means. But another reaction that surprised me was some people who had existing anxieties before the pandemic hit kind of felt validated, that, oh, suddenly everybody's feeling a little bit of what I'm feeling, and the expectations that have been put on me have been taken off somewhat, because now the majority has similar needs to me. So definitely seeing some of those things early on. Nowadays, more along the lines of what Tara was saying, you know, with weather changing or the seasons changing. There's more darkness out there. Winter's coming up. I don't know if there's the same read on things, but it certainly feels different this time than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's definitely been some really wonderful sort of glimpses of light that have shone through, I think, throughout this whole period, with efforts in the community like the caremongering, delivering food to people who can't afford or aren't able to go grocery shopping, things like that. We've really seen the resilience of, our friends and our coworkers and people that we know in the community really just shine and show that, again, you're not alone in this. There are people there to support you. And that's been really magnificent, I think.
Well, and as Justin was saying too, for people who have been grappling with different types of challenges before this, having, the general public have a window into what that feels like and what that sounds like and it looks like, is huge. Sorry, does anybody else hear that? Oh, I think that might be okay. Is huge because I think one of the things that helps to create is just a much deeper awareness and understanding. And so, things like that help to remove the stigma at work. And, we've learned that through this pandemic that, say pre-pandemic, there were a lot of people that struggled with working in an office environment due to anxiety and being in social situations. And then, the other side of that is that, the people who were very comfortable in those office and really thrived on and fed off of those social situations are now missing that. So they are now experiencing what people who had anxiety in social situations, they're experiencing that now. It's in the reverse, right? So now their work environment is uncomfortable for them because they don't have that interaction. And the people who, were anxious about working in social situations get a bit of a break, and get that understanding of, see, it's not as easy to get that report done when you're dealing with the weight of this thing. Can either of you speak to that at all?
I think I have some thoughts in that area. Like I think what you're acknowledging, Brad, is among other things, is the multi kind of layered nature of our workplaces. Like they're a place where we make money, sure, but I think as you're also touching on is they're a place where to some extent we experience a bit of our social selves. And one thing about the pandemic, you're absolutely right. It's kind of cut ourselves off from bits and pieces of that these rhythms of our lives have been disrupted in such a way where certain social needs aren't getting met. And some of us haven't always found ways to kind of scratch that itch in this new normal. And it can be incredibly destabilizing for mental health. And I think that's one thing I've been noticing as well, just how many how fulfilling a workplace is and how many needs a workplace fills, and what happens to those needs when business as usual is interrupted. So I think many of us are left to try to find other avenues to meet those needs. And sometimes we do it in very, what I like to call sanctioned ways, like we work out more, or we schedule Zoom calls with our friends. And I think we were also seeing the flip side of that too, though, is the kind of trying to soothe with substances or with, other activities that might get us in trouble.
A follow-up question for both of you, and maybe we'll start with Tara. What sort of things have you seen in your experience of friends and colleagues and people in your social circles and networks? What sort of things have you seen people do to overcome this in a positive way? I mean, Justin had mentioned maybe working out and that kind of thing, but there's certainly that a very specific social component here. Sometimes a Zoom call is not necessarily going to fulfill that hole or that need. What other sort of things, maybe starting with Tara, do you think that you've seen that have helped to bridge that social gap?
So I've seen, one of the things that we've noticed that really assists with improving mental health is service to others. And if you can get involved in any sort of, if you have the ability to, whether that be financially or with your time, if you have the ability to do something that's in service to others, it can be a remarkable improver of negative mental health impacts. And we've seen a lot of that through some of the community work that we do and just what you kind of see online, what other people are doing. I know for my team at Path, we are on Zoom all day. And it's one of the things that we thought would be really helpful is in the office, we've always had an open door policy. And so now we have an open Zoom policy where we start a link at the start of the day and keep it open, and people can pop into your Zoom meeting just like they would pop into your office. And we find that that's really helped to keep people connected, from a workplace standpoint.
That's a very cool idea.
Yeah, and we hear each other type, and we hear each other on the phone, and it almost kind of replicates an office environment, although not totally. It does kind of help build that connection with each other and keep that going.
Wow, that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And louder for the kids at the back, service to others. I second that 100%. We were CoMotion was a big part of this as well with and has been for the last 2 years with the 5 Days for Good campaign. That personally, that did so much for me through the transition where we were pulled from our studio space, pulled from our, everything that we were building and working towards. And I don't want to say it was like a distraction in a bad way, but it was definitely a fantastic outlet to refocus energy and reinforce positive energy for not just me, but our whole team, and CoMotion and all these other organizations and Path that all support that type of initiative. I love that, and I want to write that in big, bright, flashing letters. Helping other people is one of the best things that you can do for your own mental stability.
Mm-hmm. I think, Tara, you kind of touched on something there too, talking about missing the popping into other people's offices or kind of instantaneousness of chats, and then Brad, you kind of touched on it with also sort of the philanthropic side of the 5 Days for Good and what Jet Propelled did. So I think maybe shifting it a bit to not just the individual but the employer. What advice would you give an employer? Or even workspace from a CoMotion perspective on how to be more aware of these challenges and how to support employees or workers who either are working remotely and or back in an office space or workplace at this time.
I think one of the things that's really important for employers is to really focus on being flexible right now. This isn't forever, we don't think. But we have people that are going through their own individual mental health challenges in their own way, in their own individual way. And I think one of the most important things for an employer is to just, first of all, acknowledge that. And second of all, be flexible. If there's parents with small kids at home, yeah, sure, they can work at nighttime. If you can do your job, this tie that we've all had to the 9 to 5 or the 8:30 to 4:30, it's almost been proven to not really need to exist anymore. You can still get your job done if you're lucky enough to work in an environment where you can, and you're not going into another type of environment perhaps. But employers on the whole, I think flexibility is key, and understanding that people are going through stuff in their own way right now, and to just be open to listening to maybe what their own suggestions are. And we talk about this a lot at Path because, of course, we support people with disabilities in accessing and asserting themselves to request accommodations. And what we've learned over the years is that accommodations cost nothing, and most of the time cost very, very little. And if an employer can provide a small accommodation or an adjustment for somebody who's dealing with some mental health challenges, then you've got a loyal employee who's going to stay with you and who's going to get the job done because you're allowing them that space to meet their own needs so that they can help you to meet yours.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wouldn't add much more to what Tara said. There's I mean, it's almost like most of us have at least two jobs right now. There's the what we do for our 9 to 5 or whatever hours we happen to hold, but there's also the external work of all the adjusting that we've been doing, and that's a different kind of labor too. And I think, like Tara's saying, having some flexibility on the employer's part and some acceptance that people might not be firing on all cylinders these days, and maybe that's okay, would probably be important. I also been hearing a lot from clients who have been fortunate enough to work through the pandemic, that it kind of shines a light on some of the mental health tokenism that can happen in the workplace, where you can hear a lot of talk about how important mental health is, but when it comes to people needing certain accommodations, there's a shame around it, or there's a stigma to it. And so I guess one additional thing I would add is that modeling can be an important part for an employer. In walking the walk and saying, hey, I'm taking some time off because things have been too much, or I'm not feeling so well, I'm taking a mental health day. I find that can do a lot to shift the culture of a workplace where mental health is a dirty word.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's a great thing to have in consideration. And I personally have experience working for, in a past job, working for a boss that, she was very much the type of person to set a precedent that was expected. So the kind of thing like, she's not going to ask anybody to do anything that she wouldn't do. But then her line was way off the charts, and she was like, I can do it, so you can do it, kind of thing. And it's just like, well, not everybody operates at that frequency or intensity. So, maybe as an employer, if you are the type of person that does operate at that capacity, maybe just taking a cue and saying, and understanding that not everybody does. And maybe, even if I don't need to take that mental health day, maybe that's what I need to do for my team. Maybe that mental health day isn't for me. It's for me to set that example and show my team that it's okay. I think that's a great point. One other thing that I wanted to ask as a follow-up to that is from the employee side. So, with the, certainly the stigmas have not gone away. They haven't disappeared. Certainly there's a lot more understanding and awareness around them now than maybe there ever has been. But from the employee standpoint, do you have any recommendation for how an employee could approach an employer who may not have the same level of awareness or consideration without, is there a surefire way that, maybe not surefire, but is there a good way that they could approach, without feeling self-conscious, without feeling nervous or worried? What is the type of verbiage that you could use, and what kind of approach could you take?
It's a great question. So it definitely is very much individualized, and everybody's circumstance will be a little bit different, and the what they need will always be a little bit different. But what we do advise in most cases is to come from a place of this is how I'm going to be able to do my best work for you if I have this small adjustment. Mm-hmm. I will be able to perform better, whatever that small adjustment may be. I know for myself, my small adjustment is I need, half an hour in the morning to drive kids around to school before I can start my day. Even though my day starts at home, I can't, buses aren't necessarily as safe. And so we do the drive to school thing. And I need an adjustment. I need an adjustment in the morning, and I need an adjustment around 3 to go and pick kids up. So talking to my boss about that isn't necessarily related to mental health, but it's the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I need an adjustment, just like somebody who needs to maybe take medication for a mental illness, and they're better working in the evening, or they're better working in the afternoons once that's kicked in. And you don't have to go into great detail about what the challenge is,
Mm-hmm.
but be more specific about what it is you're asking for.
That's an interesting point too, about not getting too far into detail. It's interesting because I've found that with, both being an employee and an employer, there's this gray area, and obviously, Tara, working in this industry specifically, the the governing guidelines quite well, I'm sure. But for a lot of employers, for a lot of employees, there's this gray area where, maybe on the employer side, you want to be there for your employee, you want to be concerned, you want to be supportive. But as much as you want that, you also have to understand that there's rules and regulations about how much you can ask or inquire, or that kind of thing. And certainly that freedom goes to the employee as to how much information they wish to divulge or discuss, and that kind of thing. Do you have any advice for I guess employers in this case? How do you figure out where that line is? How do you not cross the line of I care about my employees, I want to make sure everybody's okay, but I also don't want to broach that privacy line or that consideration? That's a tough one.
That's a bit of a tough one. So I mean, I think the same way that the employee is coming forward with saying, I need an adjustment to my schedule, or I need to be able to leave and take a break at certain times throughout the day. I think an employer really needs to respect that, first of all, how hard that might have been for the employee to come forward to talk about that and to make that request. But as an employer myself, I don't need to know the details as to why. Mm-hmm. But I think if you establish that open door or virtual open door and that space for people to be honest, I think typically they will. And, I know for our team, we have staff that will say, it's not a good day. I need a few hours today. I'm just going to check out, and I'll check back in, this evening and finish up whatever it was I was working on. And that's okay. And I don't need to ask for more detail on that or, follow-up questions. And the hope is that as more people talk about what they need, that more employers will be inclined to just be okay with it. And I think, forums like this are really important to be able to discuss it. We all have different challenges, when it comes to mental health. And I know the stats are 1 in 4, but I'd argue that it's probably more like 4 in 4. At some point, we'll have a challenge of dealing with some sort of mental health challenge. And Justin, you probably know more about the statistics on that, but that's what I would suggest.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. Life is really hard. Right. Yeah. That's great. I wanted to ask a question to Justin. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but in talking about how do we recognize these subtle signs and tease out these subtle signs in other people, with so many things that are going on and affecting everybody. Me, Ryan, Tara, Justin, everybody on this call. How do we take note of these subtle changes and differences and things that pop up within ourselves? So not just looking at other people, but when is the line where it's it's like, okay, well this is just a normal reaction to things that are going on. I'm a little bit upset about this. I'm a little bit anxious about this, or whatever. What kind of signs pop up that indicate that we've crossed that line into we should probably be talking to somebody about this at this stage?
Sure. So again, I think about recognizing how impaired you feel by how impaired you're feeling and how long it's been going on for, and again, whether you actually have a diagnosis that can help. And you can talk to family doctors are a great first stop on your way to finding out whether there might be a mental health challenge at play that might be being exacerbated by the pandemic. But I think it also involves a lot of spending time with yourselves, which is something I don't think a lot of us are that good at. These days we're a very distracted culture. Before the pandemic hit, and I think the pandemic has only turned the volume up on that, where we might be, spending a lot of time on social media or binging every series that comes out on Netflix, or, or fill in the blank. And I think that in itself can be a sign that we might be avoiding something, or what kind of feeling or what kind of state am I trying not to experience by doing all these other things, which can be a sign that we're in trouble. But it could also be an opportunity or an invitation to, press pause and go inside and just, without distractions, like no phone nearby or no TV on, and just notice where your mind is tending to go and what kinds of feelings are coming up with that. Basically journaling without the pen. And I don't think journaling is too bad of an idea either. I think it's a kind of an amalgamation of other things we've talked about today, like just noticing our deviations from our norms, but also taking time to know what those norms are. It's hard to notice that we've changed if we have made it a habit of getting acquainted with ourselves first.
So maybe this is a good time for everyone to work on their introspective muscle. Yeah,
it's tricky sometimes.
It is. Yeah, it is tricky. For those of us who maybe don't have that innate quality, do you have any recommendations for exercises or anything like that people could do? Certainly, I'm sure meditation is possibly one of those things, but are there any other sort of tools or processes that people could look at to build that introspective muscle so that they can recognize these subtle differences a little bit easier?
Yeah, I would say meditation, but with a caveat. I think a lot of us use meditation as a means to an end, more specifically as a means to feeling relaxed. It's almost like meditation is synonymous with a relaxation exercise, and I think kind of course correcting there and just using meditation as a way to check in with the self without any kind of expectations or goals or judgments of what the right or wrong experience to have is, just to flex that muscle, as you put it. You can do a meditation exercise and go inside and notice all kinds of feelings of worry or sadness there, and that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. In fact, that can be a positive sign that you're zeroing in and becoming acquainted with something that has been there and under the surface and maybe not getting as much attention as it needed. I mentioned journaling earlier. That can be a useful exercise too. And again, a caveat, just making sure. Sometimes we can journal as a creative way to ruminate and just regurgitate the things that are bothering us over and over again. And it can be a way to kind of rehearse certain circuitry that might not be super helpful. So I think kind of doing that, but taking an attitude of is this helping me? Is this helping me do what's important to me in my day, in my week, in my life? And am I feeling better? Am I feeling more connected to others?
So you're referencing more, or to be aware that there's the potential of like neuroplasticity, where you start to make those connections stronger. Anything that if you lift weights the same way over and over again, it's going to make that muscle stronger. And if you think the same things over and over again, it's going to make that connection in your neural pathways stronger. And you want to make sure that, any of those repetitive things that you keep thinking are positive. If there is something negative, then certainly you want to recognize that and understand what that is, but don't necessarily lean into it
Yeah. I both and there's a, for every helpful mental health practice, it can be taken in a way where it's not helpful. And right. I liked what you said, Brad, about acknowledging. You make space to acknowledge if there's something negative there, but you don't lean into it. step into this other circuitry that might be more helpful.
Right. I wonder if we've got about 10 minutes left. If anyone on the call with us today or on the series today would like to ask a question, if we want to open it up, just kind of reinforce that, yeah, you're welcome to ask a question anytime. If you wanted to type it into the chat, if you'd rather us ask it for you, we can do that. Or if you would like to ask a question, just let us know in the chat and then we'll queue you up.
Yeah. And one thing that Catherine Johnston mentioned earlier today is just she was thankful for the fact that it came up that there's no one size fits all answer for everybody. So, you know, one thing that I think was put really well earlier in the pandemic is somebody said, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Right. Which I think is important to keep in mind. And one thing that Justin brought up earlier today is that, you know, and I identify with in a lot of ways as well, is that for some people, you know, this has been a really positive experience in some respects, still challenging in a lot of ways. Don't get me wrong, this hasn't been a thrill a minute for me, but this has certainly been an eye-opening experience for me to sort of be kicked off of the hamster wheel, you know, so to speak, and go, oh, you know, wait a minute, I've been running this blueprint my whole life, and there's another page that I can write, you know, I can write this whole other blueprint and do something else, because everybody was sort of forced into that situation, you know, unwillingly, like, hey, blueprint's gone right now, so I don't know, figure it out. And for a lot of people, that was a saving grace to say, oh my God, I've had horse blinders on my whole life, and I didn't even realize there was this whole amazing potential over here or over here. So that's certainly been positive for a lot of people. But then certainly recognizing that that's not going to be the case for everybody, and that's where you need to be empathic, under these circumstances as much as possible as well.
And I think that there's ebbs and flows to it for everybody too. You know, Absolutely. You might be feeling great one minute, and there's probably other people that are also feeling great. And then you're not feeling so hot the next minute, and there's other people that are feeling the same way too. And one of the cool things that one of our kids said early on was that this really sucks, but we're experiencing history in the making. And how many kids get to say that?
Yeah.
Good or bad.
On a number of different fronts too.
Absolutely.
Just in terms of everything that's going on, yeah.
I feel like everybody is sort of being given an unwilling masterclass in emotional intelligence these days, which, you know, it obviously has its benefits as well. Ryan, did you maybe want to wrap with our last little bit there?
Sure. Did you have a specific question or?
Just
the final? Yeah. And actually, this one I'm really interested in hearing too. I know since everything kind of came down back in March, I'm a very avid reader to begin with, but in terms of having a bit more time on my hands to be able to read or take on different sources or learn different things or listen to podcasts or Audible while going for a run, been trying to digest as much information as possible. But in terms of just whether it is books, whether it is sources, whether it is other different supports, what are resources that you might recommend to people joining us today in terms of going forward, whether it is to address existing challenges or to seek maybe support, or even just kind of going forward and that sort of self-discovery and self-learning and self-growth?
I have three. One is maybe as much entertainment as it is helpful. We didn't touch on this a lot, but a big development in the pandemic is the impact it's had on our relationships. Some of us have found ourselves spending more time with partners than ever before. At any point, we are bringing to our partners needs that other people used to fulfill, like our workspaces. So I like Esther Perel's Where Should We Begin podcast, where she does basically couples therapy sessions and you explore some of the dynamics at play there. On a more, maybe more useful note, I think bouncebackontario.ca is a great resource for people who have mild to moderate depression, anxiety, and stress. It's a free resource with phone coaching with a mental health professional and some material to work through. I think that can be really useful, especially since there are big wait lists for clinics like mine, or even community mental health settings. And togetherall.ca is another really useful one. And I see Tara nodding and think she's familiar with that one. It has some self-guided courses for managing stress, anxiety, depression, improving your sleep, regulating anger, just lots of it's very multifaceted. And there's also a community support forum there that I think can be really helpful for those folks who are feeling isolated in some of their experiences these days.
That's great. Thank you. And we'll get those resources from you after the call and post on the socials as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
That's really great, Justin. That's two out of 3 of my suggestions you said, so we're on the same page for sure. Another one that I'd recommend is ementalhealth.ca. Tons of resources on there, and links to different activities and sources of support that are available. And if you have a company that you're working for that has an employee assistance program, maybe checking into your EAP as well would be really good. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Great.
So we're just about at the end of our time. I just wanted to give each of you just a little bit of space. If you had any final thoughts or anything like that before we close out, Tara.
I think just to reiterate, we're all going through this together, and I think just remembering that is really key. No matter what you're feeling, there's someone else that's feeling the same way. And if you may not feel like reaching out to somebody else for support, but chances are that somebody's really eager to give that support and lend a hand when you're not feeling so great. So it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
Great
point.
Yeah, I just would want to say thank you to both of you for creating space for conversations like this. The pandemic has stirred up a lot of different feelings for different people, and as we touched on, people aren't always processing it. And I think conversations like these are great venues for doing some of that processing, or at least starting those gears.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so we're at the last minute. So thank you everyone for joining us today and for having this discussion. And we'll be back, I believe, December 1st at 1 p.m. And we'll be putting up information about that really shortly. But otherwise, Brad, any final words?
No, this was great. I really appreciate everybody joining us. I appreciate you, Tara and Justin, for joining us and providing a lot of really great new ideas and thoughts that are not common. I mean, we, like I said earlier, kind of jokingly, that we're all kind of getting a masterclass in emotional intelligence. When the fact is that none of us are qualified for that. So it's good to get some qualified expertise on the subject and to reaffirm some of the things that are positive and that we already have in place, and to also provide support and new resources to things that we wouldn't have otherwise had access to. So thank you both very, very much. And again, we'll reach out to you if you can send us the resources, links to the resources and that you mentioned earlier. We'll provide that out to our mailing list and also to our social media accounts. But other than that, we wish everybody the absolute best. Give yourselves a break, reach out for help, give yourself whatever you need in this moment, and do your best to try and reaffirm the positive as much as you possibly can. And we look forward to getting together with everybody in about a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thanks guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.